This video tutorial explains how to use HTML forms created using third-party HTML editors in AwareIM. Native AwareIM forms that you can create using Embedded Form Designer are very powerful, and normally you don't need to use any other forms. However, if you want to use very specific styling, which is difficult to achieve using native AwareIM forms, you can create such forms outside of AwareIM using any HTML editor of your choice, and then import them into AwareIM. In this tutorial, we will go through this process in detail. An example of a custom HTML form is available in the library sample application, which I have deployed here. I'm using the application as a guest user, and there is a menu item called Register that allows me to enter my details in order to be registered with the library. This registration form has been implemented as custom HTML form. Let's have a look at it. You can see that its styling is quite different from most AwareIM forms. Let's go through the process of adding a custom form from scratch. So we go to the Configuration tool and open the library application. Before we import the custom HTML form, let's have a look at it outside of AwareIM. Here I have the HTML registration form, which is freely available on the internet. I have modified it slightly and added some library-specific controls. This is the HTML of the form. It is actually very simple, and most of the work is done by the CSS styling embedded inside the style HTML element. This is the styling. This is how the form looks like in the browser. Let's now use it inside AwareIM. To do this, let's define a new form for the appropriate business object, the member object in this case. We will create a new form called Registration 2. We can see that in the New Form dialog, there are two options: create a AwareIM managed form or create an HTML form. We will choose the second option, give the name to the form, and click on the Import HTML button, and then we will choose our form. When we click OK, the form is added to the object and is displayed in the Form Designer. We can see the form displayed almost exactly as it is displayed in the browser. We now need to map all input controls of the form to the attributes of the object, and all buttons used in the form to AwareIM operations. The fields that we have to map are displayed with a light yellowish color. The process is simple enough. We click on the field or button we want to map and then choose the corresponding attribute or operation. Let's go through these fields one by one. Selected fields are displayed with the cyan color, and fields that are already mapped are displayed with a bright yellow color. Note that radio buttons have to be mapped to the same attribute, gender in this case. For now, let's not worry about other properties that we can specify here. That's literally all we have to do. This form can now be used in a whereIam, just like any native whereIam form. Let's save the form and make sure that this form is used for registration rather than the original form. Let's see how this works in the browser. So now, when we click on the Register menu item, we see our form. It looks pretty good and can be used straight away. Note that whereIam automatically validates all attributes that need validation and displays error messages on the form. Here, some of the attributes that we have mapped to are mandatory, so you can see whereIam displays an error if the value hasn't been provided. The phone number attribute has been configured to use the US phone number, so all other formats will not be accepted. Once again, this is all provided automatically by whereIam, and you don't need to do anything to support it in your custom form. You can also use whereIam styling and widgets in your custom HTML forms. Only some whereIam widgets can be used, and those that can be may introduce conflicts between whereIam CSS styles and styles in the HTML form, so you need to be careful. Let's look at the date of birth control here. Now it is displayed by the browser date widget. This is the default behavior of this widget. A whereIam widget for dates is a little bit different, so let's replace this widget with an whereIam widget. Let's also replace radio buttons and checkboxes used in this form with the whereIam radio buttons and the whereIam checkboxes that look slightly better. Let's go back to the configuration tool, open our form, and select radio buttons and checkboxes. We will then check the user whereIam styling property. We will then select the date of birth field and also select this property, user whereIam widget and styling. Let's see how this looks in the browser. When we open our form, we can see that radio buttons and checkbox look a lot better now, but the date of birth widget is totally wrong. This is because there is indeed a conflict here between the style used in the form and the whereIam styling of the widget. Let's try to change the styling of this field in the HTML form so that it becomes compatible with the whereIam styling. Let's have a look at the HTML of the form. The only setting here that could have affected the input control is this style. This style is applied to all input controls in the form. Let's change this so that these settings do not apply to our date of birth input control, but apply to all other controls. Note that if we make a change in the original HTML, we would have to delete our form, import it again, and then map attributes and operations again. In order to avoid this, let's export the form that we already have, make a change, and import it again. So we open the form again and click on the export button here. Let's have a look at this form. We can see that it's very similar to the original form, except that AwareIM has added some of its own classes and attributes, like here, for example. We don't need to worry about these classes and attributes. So now let's exclude our date of birth control from the list of controls that the styling applies to. We will assign a unique ID to this control. Change the type to text and exclude this control from styling, like so. Now let's import this form back into AwareIM. So there is an import button here. We select the exported form. We can see that all our mappings have been preserved and the styling of the date of birth control has been changed. Let's also make sure that the label is on top of the field. So we'll go back to the HTML. Assign a style to the label. Make sure that it does not include input control. And change the margin of this subsequent element. Let's now import it again. Now let's see how this looks in the browser. We'll open our form again, and we can see that the widget looks good. Let me now say a few words about HTML forms that include external files, such as CSS files, JavaScript, or images. If these files are located on different servers and they are included using absolute URLs, then you don't need to do anything. But if references to these files are relative, you should put them into a subfolder underneath the AwareIM Tomcat Web Apps AwareIM directory. The best place to put these files in is the Custom Forms directory. Here, for example, I have a form that references a CSS and an image file. I put these files into this directory here. And this is how I refer to these files. Note that I need to put 2 dots in front of the file name. If I do this, my forms will be properly displayed in the browser and in the preview. And a couple of other things about custom HTML forms. These forms are generated inside an iframe element in AwareIM. The width of this element can be controlled using the width of the form. This also includes minimum and maximum widths, specified as part of the resizing property of the form. There are some limitations as well. For example, the input of the type file is not supported, so you cannot download files from custom forms. The HTML select elements can be mapped to reference attributes, single and multiple, represented as drop-downs, but you cannot map grid, swap selects, trees, and so on. If you want tabs on your custom forms, they need to be supported by the JavaScript of the custom form itself. You cannot rely on where-I-am form sections. There are no limitations on the JavaScript that can be used with custom forms, which means that you can use any third-party JavaScript library with your custom forms.